Good evening and welcome to Talk Right. I'm your host, Wayne Stennett, and tonight we got a really cool show. My co-host Nick Sullivan just walked in the door. He's down up in Tennessee, down in Tennessee. He's up in Tennessee to me, down in Tennessee to him for the holidays, and he's doing a remote broadcast. So, Nick, why don't you take over and introduce our special guest?
All righty. Well, hello from Tennessee. Happy 2024, everybody. And let me see. Our guest here is Damon Courtney, creator of BookFunnel. Before we had him on here and before I started talking to him, I just thought he was some guy at BookFunnel. I always know he represents BookFunnel, but no, he made the dang thing, and it's huge. If you are an author, you know what BookFunnel is. Um, Damon, I want to just have a little bit of background. If you could explain like how long BookFunnel's been around and what was the germination of it, what made you go, you know what we need?
Yeah. So we just passed 8 years in October. So we opened our doors in October 2015. And it started because it was an indie author. I had indie published a fantasy trilogy and was now like, don't do what I did, kids, which was write a bunch of books and then have no idea how to market them. But back in 2011, nobody knew how to market anything. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. We're like, hey, I like writing books and this is fun, right? So I had published my fantasy trilogy and I was starting to learn the marketing aspects. And the sort of gurus at the time, which, some of them are still talking today, and some of the advice is still the same, which was like, oh, you really should build a mailing list. Like you should be able to communicate directly with your readers. I was like, oh, that sounds like a good idea. How do I do that? They're like, oh, well, you offer them a free short story or something. You let them have it for getting on your list. Okay, that sounds like a great idea. How do I deliver that to them? Oh, you just email it to them. You're like, but how do they, yeah. And if you were there back in those days, you would be laughing like Wayne is. Because I immediately tried that, and I'm a pretty techie guy. So I already knew how to get books to my Kindle using Send to Kindle. That wasn't a complicated process to me, but I immediately recognized this is not going to be something that your average reader is going to be able to do. So I set out. My wife would be fond of telling you that I think I can solve all problems with software. But in this case, I was actually right. I was like, no, I think I can solve this problem. I think I can make this work. So that was really the germinating idea of BookFunnel, was just like, okay, I want to give away a thing. I really just wanted to give away my reader magnet. When we started, that's all I wanted to be able to do, was just put my reader magnet into the hands of readers and have them be able to get it onto the device that they're already reading on, or the app that they're reading in, and actually be able to read the book. Because I could see like, oh, well, if I give you the short story, but you can't actually get it to your device and read it, that's not going to help me sell more books later, right? So I built the initial idea of BookFunnel, and we launched in 2015. And then from there, we just started adding features that our authors were asking us for. Authors were emailing us and saying, hey, I'd like to be able to deliver my advanced reader copies. And we were like, oh, well, the way that we're doing that now, the core delivery process of just helping readers get the books to their devices, that part was fine. That was sort of the underpinning of it all. But, if you're delivering ARCs or advanced copies, you're doing something a little bit different. You don't want those to accidentally get into the hands of other people. Eventually, I tell you, since our topic today, we're talking about direct sales, but that was the first feature request we got. We'd only been open for a week, and people were like, well, can you deliver? I'm thinking about selling direct from my website. Can BookFunnel deliver those? And we were like, we just opened a week ago. We don't even have a lot of this stuff worked out yet. So we're still working on it. And then we started, the second feature request we got, by the way, was for audiobooks. Where it was like, we haven't even figured out ebooks yet. So all the features that we've built in the 8 years since have really all come from our authors, and authors saying, we're indie authors. We need to be able to do this. And BookFunnel we would say, my wife and I would sit down and say, oh, we can build that. Like, I think that's something that we could build that would be really helpful. But it really all came because I was an indie author, and by then I was fully steeped in not just the self-publishing side as an industry, but as a reader. I read so many authors who are indie authors now. And so I had I've been a lifelong reader. I have a vested interest in making sure that authors are out there doing the best things that they can to get their books out into the world so that they don't stop writing, right? Back in the early days, it was really common to start reading some great, amazing author's book one, only to find out that was the only
Yeah.
book you ever got. They never wrote another book probably because they couldn't figure it out. They
You
couldn't
know
figure
what's
out.
really, you know what's really cool? Reading a really, really good book is one thing, but when you're reading a really, really good book that you know the person personally who wrote it and you know what their motivation was,
Mhm.
that's what's really cool. I've read every one of Nick's books. He's read every one of mine aloud. uh, we have a little group and we've all read each other's books, and it's really cool seeing what everybody comes up with.
Well, and it's
But
so interesting, like when you meet somebody, because I go to the NINC Novelist Inc. conference every year, and I go to the 20 Books conference, which is now Author Nation in Las Vegas. And there are several others that I go to, but I'm a fantasy reader. I'm a fantasy writer and a fantasy reader. I dabble, as all fantasy readers, I dabble a little in science fiction, but for the most part, I read epic fantasy, dragons and wizards and elves and all of that sort of stuff, right? And it's fascinating to me when I meet a fellow author who writes in fantasy and they're telling me about their books. I'm like, oh, that sounds really interesting. And I go in to read it. And it's so crazy to try and square the person that you met and then this
with
book
what
that
you're
you're
reading,
reading. And it's just
yeah,
like, man, this book is fantastic. Like, I had no idea that the guy that I was talking to or the girl that I was talking to is this damn good. And then you're reading the books and you're like, man, this is good stuff. That actually happened to me. So flying back from NINC this last year, NINC is in September. And in September, I actually bumped into in the airport as we were going to NINC, Andrew Cobble, who writes under the pen name, the fantasy pen name AC Cobble. I knew that he wrote fantasy. I didn't really think much about it, but he is also from Houston. I'm down in Houston, Texas, and he's from the same area. There's another fantasy writer who lives north of us and named Michael Manning. He was also on the same flights going out to NINC when Andrew and I were. So on the flight back, we all three were on the same flight back, right? And we'd hung out a little bit and talked at NINC. And as I went to sit down, I had the seat next to Michael Manning. He had his Kindle out, he was reading, and I was like, oh, hey, what do you, I'm reading a book, but I know that I'm about to finish the book that I was reading. And so I was like, oh, hey, what are you reading right now? He goes, oh, I'm actually reading Andrew's book. And he like points to the back where like Andrew has a seat behind us somewhere. I was like, oh, is it good? He's like, oh yeah, it's really good. I'm on book 3 of the it was the Benjamin Ashwood series was the name of the series. And it was actually Andrew's first series, the first one, the series he first published. And he said, yeah, I'm on book 3. It's really good. Oh, so I pick it up and I grab the first book. Well, when I finished my book on the flight home, I started reading that. And by the time I was done reading that, I was hooked. I read the whole Benjamin Ashwood series, which I think was I think it's 6 books total. And by the time I was done with 6 books, I'm hooked. I'm an AC Cobble fan now. Like now I'm going back and I'm reading all of his books. And that's so funny because I've known him for years as just yeah, I knew he wrote fantasy. I'd never really picked up one of his books before. And now I'm a big fan of his writing.
well, let's fast forward a little bit.
Yeah.
uh, let's talk more about direct sales and integrating BookFunnel with the different online stores. I use WooCommerce. You can also integrate with Shopify and what other stores work?
So we started when we launched direct sales, which was actually we announced it at NINC in 2017. So that's how long we had the feature, right? And for the last, I don't know, for the really leading up until about 2022, we had a number of authors that used it that that were doing pretty well with it, but we didn't have a lot of authors that used it. When we originally launched it, we launched with WooCommerce, Shopify, PayPal, PayHip, and then Sells, which is now gone. They got bought out by Amazon. And then later we added Gumroad, Thrivecart, and there's probably another one that I'm forgetting. So we integrate with about 6 or 7 different sales platforms now because
So
they
just
each
about
do
any platform that any author could be using.
most of the ones that you're going to want to use, right? It typically the 2 biggest ones really comes down to Shopify and WooCommerce, and it's kind of how indie do you want to be, right? So WooCommerce is very much it's WooCommerce is a plugin that's built on top of WordPress, and so you're going to do a lot of the work yourself. But if you really like owning everything on your website and everything belongs to you, then WooCommerce is the way to go. Shopify is kind of is the more integrated solution, but it's also going to cost you a lot more money, right? Shopify has a monthly fee, whereas just installing WooCommerce on your WordPress really isn't going to add any monthly cost to you if you're already hosting your a WordPress website somewhere. So those two are the biggest. We support all those other platforms that I have, and we have a number of authors that use them, but the two biggest ones that we see are going to be WooCommerce and Shopify. And when we launched that, for the last several years, we really didn't have, we had authors that used them really effectively, but not that many. And then sometime around really January of 2022, direct sales just started taking off in the author world consciousness. Like it for the longest time, it was sort of the niche, like only a few authors did that sort of thing. And then I don't know why, but my guess is that as we were coming out of COVID, a lot of people were just looking around and going, maybe I need to try my hand at getting my books out there in other ways and trying other sales opportunities, because this whole thing is just really scary, right? Just like setting aside the actual, virus and pandemic and all that stuff. If you really just look at holy crap, the world just kind of went crazy. And as we started to come back down, I think a lot of people were just sort of nervous about what their future might look like if they don't own at least some piece of their destiny. And, to me, that's really where direct sales takes you, is that if you can, and Wayne and I were talking about this before we started, it's like, it's hard. It's hard to get readers who are trained to buy all of their books from Amazon or Kobo or Barnes & Noble or wherever they get them from, to say, no, come over here and buy them from my store. You can come and buy them direct from my store. And it's hard to retrain readers into that process. The great thing is that what we're seeing is more and more readers are being exposed to this, because as more and bigger authors have moved in and just sort of dipped their toes in and given direct sales a try, readers are seeing it a lot more and more. And so suddenly, like going to an author's website and then buying an ebook or an audiobook right there on their website, that's not so weird anymore. A lot of readers have now seen that happen, and so it's not nearly as foreign to them as it was a few years ago.
Oh, there's a whole audience out there that doesn't buy from the retail stores. They don't buy they don't buy books from Amazon. They don't buy books from Barnes and Noble. They only buy from direct. And they look for we have no way to advertise except Facebook. And we're kind of limited there, but still it takes a whole lot less money in advertising to recoup when you're direct selling, because your profit is literally 100%.
Right.
My account with BookFunnel, I pay that once a year. Don't worry about it. It's done. I started direct sales of ebooks in mid 2021, and things were really, really slow. But like you said, in 2022, things really started jumping. And that's when we decided, hey, can we do audiobooks too? And we figured out how to do that. So now we sell direct sales. BookFunnel is just in, I would say, 2 years, 18 months, the last 18 months, BookFunnel has become my number 2 revenue producer next to Amazon.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. It doesn't take as many books. I look at the number of books sold. Here's BookFunnel with 142 and Apple with 275, but BookFunnel's still ahead financially.
Right. Because you get to keep all the money. And especially with, I think audiobooks really sort of change the equation on direct sales in a lot of ways, because you already weren't getting the lion's share from Audible, right? Every author who's selling through Audible is already getting the lower cut between the two. And so, if you're exclusive, you're getting 40%. If you're non-exclusive, you're getting 25%. And that means Audible is taking all the rest. So it doesn't take a lot of audiobook sales, even if you're selling them at a discounted rate. Most of the authors that we see that are selling using BookFunnel as delivery, they're willing to price their audiobooks between $8.99 and $12.99. Well, that's already cheaper than the $14.95 credit that most people are paying over on Audible. So you're saying as an author, like, listen, I'll give you a discount if you buy direct from me. But if I sell a $10 audiobook direct from my website, I keep $9.40 after the transaction fees. You sell that same book on Audible for a full $14.95, and you get $4. You get about $4 and change off of it. So you're making double the money, and you're actually giving your readers a big discount. It's so that, like, ebooks have always been mostly fair, right? Amazon taking their 30% cut of an ebook sale is, most authors are like, that seems fairly reasonable, right? A retailer taking a 30% cut of your sale. But just when you throw audiobooks into the mix, it just doesn't take a lot of sales to match the revenue. Now, you may not ever get as many sales directly from your website as you would have on other retailers, but you don't need nearly as many to match the revenue.
Especially like you said, especially with the audiobooks. I price mine at, my highest priced audiobook is $10.99, because if somebody who subscribes to Audible already used their $14.95 credit to buy somebody else's audiobook, they have to spend $11.95 to buy another credit. So my audiobook's less than that by a buck, and you get another 10% off. So, and there's so many different things you can do direct selling that you can't do with through a retailer. Just the exposure. You can give books away. Just somebody has a problem, and I don't want to figure out what the techno babble crap was that made the problem. I just send them a book.
Yeah,
it's easy.
Well, and there are so many
things.
Let
me jump. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Jump in.
Well, so Wayne's already sort of mentioned it. One of the only things we can do if, I say I'm not direct selling. I don't have enough books. It just doesn't seem worth it to me yet. Because if I go to my subscriber base and go, hey, get from me and save money, I've got, a 20th of the number of people listening to me that Wayne has.
Right.
But at some point I intend to shift. And what I'm sort of wondering is, and since this is your line of work, maybe you know some things other than Facebook that one can try, because the reason a lot of us stick with Amazon and Audible exclusively is because Amazon gets you eyeballs and Audible gets you ear holes. And I don't know how to do that apart from my small subscriber base if I start doing direct sales. So other than Facebook, have you found any other things, heard about any other things?
The biggest authors that we see that are really, really doing well with direct sales are, you have two audiences that you're selling to. One, as you were noting, was your existing subscriber base. So anybody who's already read your stuff is already a fan, and those are going to be easier sells. They already like your stuff and they already read your stuff. And so those are easier to hit up with things like pre-selling, right? So where you're not necessarily going all in on the direct sales thing. So I gave a talk at NINC where I kind of talked about what I consider to be the 4 pillars of direct selling, which are pre-selling. So I'm not setting up most of the time when we talk about direct selling or direct sales, people think we're talking about building out a gigantic ebook and audiobook store. And you can do that, right? That's ultimately, if you have the backlist, as you were talking about, Nick. Like, if you don't have a lot of books, if you don't have a pretty long backlist, it may not be in your best interest to go and build out this big store and do the whole thing, right? But you don't have to do that to get started. You really can start with things like pre-selling, where you say, hey, listen, my next book is coming out October 1st. Well, we're now into the new year. So let's say my next book is coming out February 1st, but you can buy it direct to your existing fans. You can buy it early on January 1st directly from my website. And you might not get a lot of takers on that, right? But I promise you, there are some of your fans, especially if you're in a series and you're releasing book 4 or 5, they don't want to wait 4 extra weeks. even if they could, right? They don't have to, and they don't want to. This is what we see a lot with authors on Kickstarter, right? So the first Kickstarter campaigns that I saw for fiction books more than 10 years ago were very, very different than the Kickstarter campaigns that we see today. 10 years ago, what we saw were authors like me who had that first book written and needed to get a book cover done, and it was going to cost $400 because I'm in fantasy, so we have to have somebody hand illustrate a cover or whatever, right? Or I wanted an editor, right? I used an editor on my series because I didn't know anything about writing. I wanted to be better. Well, editors are not cheap. We're talking about like developmental editing. It's not cheap. And so the Kickstarter campaigns that we saw 10 years ago were people who are like, listen, I need $3,000 to produce this book, to edit it, to put a cover on it, to do all these sort of things. What we see now are really just authors using Kickstarter as a pre-selling platform. Listen, I've already got the book done. Cover's done, edit's done. Like, the book is finished. I'm just offering you the opportunity to buy it early before it comes out, in a month or 6 months or whatever. I'm actually one of the biggest fantasy authors that I'm a huge fan of. His name is Michael J. Sullivan. He started off indie, sold some of his books traditional, and then went back to indie. He now launches every one of his new books on Kickstarter. His most recent Kickstarter, keep in mind, I'm going to give you numbers, but please don't let these discourage you. He's been doing this for a very long time, and he's built a really loyal audience, of people like me. I'm a super fan of Michael J. Sullivan, right? He launched his most recent Kickstarter, which was the third book of a trilogy that he was finishing, but it did over $380,000. And the biggest thing that you get is you get to read the book 3 months before everybody else does. Like, as soon as he's done and the edits are done and the book is polished and the ebook is ready to go, I got my copy. And then everybody else, it might be on Amazon now, but everybody else has to wait. Well, I'm a fan. I don't want to wait. And so I want to get it early. So pre-selling is we're seeing a lot of authors, even authors that are all in on Kindle Unlimited. You can still do pre-selling until the day that you push the button and put that book into KU. It's still your ebook to do with what you will. So,
well, I did see something. That's what I was going to ask. And I imagine if you're selling direct, that's the case. But there was someone recently, and several people echoed this, had happened to them too, where they put something up for pre-order on, I think, Barnes & Noble or Apple, and Amazon saw that and told them no.
That you can't start.
You cannot. So when you upload your book to Amazon, you can check the box that says, yes, I want to enroll this book in KDP Select, which is Kindle Unlimited for everybody else. Don't check that box. There is absolutely no benefit in checking that box before the day the book is released, because you can put up pre-orders, but people can't pre-add a book to their Kindle Unlimited library until the day that it's actually released. So what we tell people to do is don't check that box. For safety's sake, I would say check the box, pull your books down, and then check the box to enroll it in KU the day before actual publication, because sometimes the Amazon machine is not instantaneous. Although I've generally found that if you check the box to enroll in KU, they will enroll you in KU very quickly. If you check the box to unenroll it, they're a little slower on that side, right? But what we recommend, especially if you're doing pre-selling, is you don't check that box, because there's really no benefit to checking that box before the day of release. Now, once the book is released, you pull it down everywhere else to make sure that you're not selling it anyplace else. And if you are putting it up on retailers, if you're selling direct from your store, the minute you pull the page down from your store, that's it. The book's no longer for sale. Yeah. I mean, like, instantly. If you're putting it out and you're saying you want to let people buy it early on Apple and Kobo and Barnes & Noble and other places, you need to pull those down several days before the release, because it sometimes takes a day or two for their machinery to pull all that stuff down.
I would recommend not doing Kobo at all.
Oh, really? Do they take too long?
Well, Kobo's international stores sometimes take weeks or months to pull down. So I do just Amazon, Apple, Barnes and Noble, and my own store. And then 2 days before the release, Apple and Barnes and Noble come down, and the night before the release, my store comes down. It goes right into KU. Everybody's happy, and I've made quite a bit more money from my direct sales than I would have had they pre-ordered from somebody else.
Right. And to your question, Nick, you absolutely don't. If you check that box, let's say you upload your book and you've got a 3-month pre-order, right? If you check the box right then when you upload the book, you are technically enrolled in KU. You have agreed to exclusivity, even though you're not getting any benefit from that for 3 months, because the only time KU kicks in is when the book is actually published and available for everybody to read. So
This
just
this
don't
sounds
check
like
that box.
advice everyone should be taking,
Yeah.
regardless of what they're doing. If there's no
Yeah.
reason, and as you say, it happens pretty quickly. So you could check the box the day before the release, or would you recommend 48 hours, 72 hours?
I wait
I don't know,
until the
Wayne.
morning of
Yeah.
Morning of.
that
Okay.
way the pre-orders, they all go out basically the day before, most of them. And then from midnight to 5 a.m., there might be a few sales. And then at 5 a.m., I check the box. Boom. I mean, that happens instantly. You check
Yeah.
that box, you refresh the page, boom, it's in Kindle Unlimited. And my newsletter goes out an hour later.
Yeah. Believe me, Amazon wants you to be in Kindle Unlimited, so they make sure that you're in it very quickly. It's the getting out of it, the Godfather, they pull you back in. It's getting out of it that's a little harder. But yeah, it's and until what we tell people is until you check that box, it's still your ebook to do with whatever you want, whether that's a Kickstarter or Patreon or selling direct from your website. Like all of those are examples of pre-selling, where you can still enroll the books in KU when you're ready to launch the books, but you're getting those early pre-sales before the book goes into KU. The other big one that we see that authors are doing is this is once you've gone wide, right? So if your books are actually available everywhere and wide, you can start to do things like, and you can do this with audiobooks too. So what we're actually seeing is more and more authors that were, I don't know, a year ago, we saw a lot more authors that were doing exclusivity on their audiobooks and Audible as well. But given now that selling direct is a lot easier to do, at least on the audiobook side, we're seeing more and more authors who are eschewing the exclusivity on Audible, and they're taking that 15% cut on their revenue because they're actually doing better sales direct. Not everybody. I don't want to make it sound all rosy like direct is amazing. It's hard work. And the reason is you need to have at least some existing audience if you're going to sell to that audience, or you're going to have to pay money to run Facebook ads, right? And those are you actually can run BookBub ads as well. They're harder to dial in from my experience and from the experience I've seen from other authors. They're a little harder to dial in, but there are a lot of readers over there that are listening to audiobooks that are pretty audiobook centric. What's nice about that is that, again, you don't actually have to sell that many audiobooks to make a really good revenue and even to make really good profit, because audiobook listeners are already used to paying more, right? Ebook readers have, I hate to say it, but we indies poison the well in some ways, in that like they're used to now getting their books for $1 or less. And so, you come in with your $4.99 or heaven forbid your $6.99 ebook, and people are just like, oh, $6.99. Whereas in the audiobook world, like they were used to paying $25-$30 to get an audiobook. So here you come on your website for $9.99 or $10.99, and they're like, holy crap, you can buy I can buy this whole audiobook for $10. Yeah, I'll take that. Right. And so once you start doing advertising, whether it's through Facebook ads or even if you're just hitting up your existing mailing list, you can get a lot more traction on that, because audiobook listeners see $10 as a deal. Whereas if you try to sell an ebook for $10, most readers would think they're getting ripped off for $10. Because and it's like I say that as one of the ones who also priced their books at 99 cents back in the day, because wow, you'd get so many sales, right? It was not uncommon in 2011 to put out a 99-cent ebook and sell 11,000 copies in short of a weekend, right? That doesn't really happen anymore. But readers are more used to getting ebooks at a lower price now.
Let me ask you about the audiobooks. So do you have your own player? Like what?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Because Findaway's Authors Direct has blown up, and that really only leaves.
I've had a lot of listeners email me and say that the BookFunnel player and the whole book funnel experience is even easier than Audible.
It is, and I designed it that way. See,
So it's easier
the
than Audible. It's cheaper than Audible. You get it a week early. What again is the problem?
right. So
Well,
they're all
now here's a question. Could you do what you were talking about with the ebooks on Audible if you do an initial, get it all done, especially when I narrate my own books. So the audiobooks are done super early.
Yeah.
I could conceivably, I guess, put it up for sale to my own peeps for a
Yeah.
week and then go into Audible ACX and go, all right, I have a new project for you, and it'll be exclusive.
Oh, yeah.
The exclusivity
nothing
doesn't
wrong with
look
that.
backwards, I'm guessing. It
No,
looks current and forward
it's not exclusive to them until they get it.
until you pull. Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know how Audible works in the in the sense of like when you check the box that says yes, I want to be exclusive. Some people have said that technically it's not exclusive until it's actually published. I would tend to pick that Amazon is probably going to say no, when you check the box, it becomes exclusive. But you once again, just like with Kindle Unlimited, it's until you check that box, it's yours, and you can do what you please with it. And so what we see authors doing is, yeah, they're selling that audiobook, especially they're selling it direct because of course they can get much higher revenue and much higher profits on those audiobooks. And then once it goes exclusive to Audible, it gets pulled down from their store. And that's so you had the opportunity to buy it beforehand. I'll give you a really good example. So we have an author, his name's Dakota Kraut, and you can go Google his name. He's out there. He writes in Lit RPG. And he has a company, Mountaindale Press, where they publish his books, but they also publish other lit RPG authors. But what they do now with his books is they started selling direct in January of 22. So they've been doing it now for 2 years. And the way his release cycle works is like this. Let's say the book is going to come out March 1st, right? That's when the book will be in KU and exclusive to Audible, right? So on March 1st, that's the day of publication. 4 weeks before that, on February 1st, let's just use monthly calendar. On February 1st, you can buy that book directly from mountaindalepress.com. So if you want the book 4 weeks early, you can go buy the ebook and the audiobook or the bundle of the two. You can buy those directly from the website. 2 weeks before that, so in this case, in our example, in mid-January, his patrons on Patreon get access to the ebook and the audiobook. So his biggest fans, the ones who are patrons of him on Patreon, meaning people that are paying $5, $10, $20 a month just to be part of his world.
In crowd.
Yes, just to be part of the crowd. Those people get it 6 weeks before everybody else. And that's a really sweet deal because there's a lot of FOMO, a lot of fear of missing out. And people are like, oh, yeah, don't spoil it. Don't spoil the new book. Nobody talk about it yet. I haven't got it yet. So there is a lot of that. Well, no, I'm going to be part of the crowd and I want to get it 6 weeks early. So that is their release schedule. And if you actually go to mountaindalepress.com, you can see they have a calendar there. It's just a list of when books are going to be coming out, but it will say like October 1st, book 7 will be available from Mountaindale Press. November 1st, book 7 will be available on Audible and Amazon. Like they show the schedule of when each book is going to be released and when it will be available on which platforms. So that if you prefer to have your books on Audible and you really just don't mind waiting the 4 weeks, you'd rather just make sure that all of your books are in your Audible app, fantastic. They will be released on this day. But if you want to get it 4 weeks early, it will be available from Mountaindale Press right here for 4 weeks before everybody else. And by the way, it's already been released to my patrons on Patreon. So, if you really want to get it early, you should go follow me over there, right? And I thought that was a brilliant system. It really, it hits all of the sort of people in the reader journey, right? People join, people discover your book. They pick up a book and they go, oh, that's pretty good. Like this author's good. I start reading it. It's a good book, right? That person is a reader. They're reading your books and they like your stuff. Then, they finish book 1, maybe they pick up book 2. And then by the time they get to the end of book 2, for sure, by the time they get to the end of a third book, they're a fan. I'm a fan of this writer's work. I really like their stuff. I'm going to go see what else they've got. I'm going to pick up more of their books. But ultimately, we want to get them to super fan, which is the person who is going to back all of your Kickstarters, who's going to buy everything you publish until the day that you stop publishing.
and
and
talk about you till the day they die.
and evangelize you to
Yeah.
other people, right? You know, if you've ever heard of the thousand true fan theory, it's not because a thousand which the theory basically just goes that every artist just needs 1,000 true fans, and it's not because 1,000 true fans are gonna make you a living. If you wrote books really fast, you could make a living on 1,000, just literally just 1,000 people buying your books. It's not that those 1,000 people are always going to buy your books. They will. Those 1,000 people will buy your books. But those same 1,000 people are the ones that are going to go out and tell everybody that they meet that you like mystery thrillers. If I got the author for you, you're going to love this, right? Those people are going to go out and evangelize you to all the other readers that they meet. And that is how you're going to make the living. So we want to move those readers along that journey from reader to fan to super fan, because we want the super fans, the people that are on Patreon. I'll give you another good example. Lindsay Baroker writes fantasy science fiction. She has a Patreon. She only uses her Patreon to pre-sell her books, right? So she's not over there posting daily blog posts about writing sprints and stuff like that. She the only time she posts is when she has a new book available. But if you go look at her Patreon, she has readers that have pledged, I think she's a little over $3,000 every time she publishes a book. So Patreon lets you do two different ways. You can have a monthly, which is somebody can pay you like $5 a month every month, regardless of your publishing schedule. Or you can say, no, I want $5 every time I publish a creation, which in her case is every time you publish a book. So she's charging you $5, and it's the same $5 that you're going to pay if you go buy the books when she publishes them on Amazon or whatever, right? So she's not charging you any more money. She's not even giving you a discount. She's just paying $5. But she's sitting at like $3,400 every time she puts out a new book. Those are fans that have signed up to buy Lindsay Baroker books before they even know what the book is, right? I know everybody knows about Brandon Sanderson's Kickstarter that he did last year,
gosh.
which
How much did that make?
$41 million, right? So God bless. None of us are going to be Brandon Sanderson. But what I found really awesome about that, I say this, I'm a Brandon Sanderson super fan. I absolutely backed that one all the way to the top, right? I got all 4 of those books, beautiful hardbacks, the most beautiful hardback like books that I've ever seen in my life. They're incredible. But what was crazy about that, and what people didn't see, or what publishers didn't see, was it wasn't just that there were 4 Brandon Sanderson books that you were pledging to buy on Kickstarter. It was 4 secret books. We don't even know the titles. We don't know the characters. We know they're going to be in his world of the Cosmere. That's all he gave us, right? And yet people were like, shut up and take my money. Like, I will give you hundreds of dollars. I don't even care what the books are, right? Those are super fans. Those are the ones who will buy your next book. Hey, I've got the next book coming out. What's it about? Does it matter? No, it doesn't matter. Here's my money, right? And that's where we want to, that's where every author would love to get to, right? And those are the fans who, the way that Dakota has set up his sort of publishing schedule is, those super fans, the ones that are over there on Patreon that are literally paying $10 a month just to hang out with him, those people, they get it first. You're going to get it before everybody else. And if you're not part of the Patreon, no, go ahead.
Here's a big question, because what you're talking about, the super fans, and that they'll sing your praises. One of the best ways with someone like myself with a smaller list, and is for those super fans to go give me fantastic reviews.
Sure.
On Amazon or Audible or Chirp or Goodreads even. Ugh. But anyway,
is right.
How does that happen if they're buying direct? Can you put reviews on, like, can people go to your direct thing and you actually have your own star system? Do they go over and do unverified reviews on Amazon? I don't think they can do them on Audible at all if they get your audiobook somewhere else.
You can do them on Audible. So you can actually, so most of the platforms like WooCommerce is on WordPress, and WordPress has plugins that will let you allow people to drop reviews onto your site. I know that Shopify has a number of them, and they work really well. The beautiful part about that is that on when you're selling direct, one of the biggest benefits of, I know we've talked about the money, and the money's great. Don't get me wrong. We're not dismissing the money that you get from selling direct. It's a big part of it. But more than that is the data, knowing who your buyers are, and you control every pixel on that page. So if I make a page for one of my books, let's say I put up one of my audiobooks, I control everything on that pixel, right? Every pixel on that page, which means that I put in a review plugin. And then somebody comes and leaves a really crappy review. Not an honest 1 star, I didn't like this book, but somebody just comes and bombs you and leaves some crappy review. I just go, delete that review. I don't want that review to show up anymore. Because it's your page, right? So the review plugins that you have on things like WordPress and Shopify, yeah, you can leave that up here if you want to. If you really want to torture yourself and just leave that 1 star review because you think you're being an honest author, you can absolutely do that. And maybe you do, because what's funny is like I go to shop on Amazon and I will look at the 1 star reviews, not the crappy ones that are just like, this book sucked, but the ones who are like, I really hated this character because they kept doing these really stupid things. And I would go, that's exactly what I hate. And so I will not like this book. But sometimes I'd read the 1 star reviews and goes, oh, there's too much magic in this book. It makes it feel unrealistic. I go, that's the book for me because I love magic. That's exactly why I want to read it, right? So when you are in control of the website, yeah, you can absolutely set up plugins for people to leave reviews on the book on your website. You can also go say, hey, I would love it if you'd go leave a review on Goodreads. Or you can say they can go leave an unverified review on Amazon and leave it over there. Or BookBub, you can leave reviews on BookBub. You can leave reviews on Kobo. Really, Audible is the only one that won't let you leave a review unless you've actually purchased it. But what's crazy is that we have seen readers who, especially when they're your super fans, who will buy direct from the author and buy the audiobook for $10 and then still turn around and buy it again when it comes out on Audible because they want all their books in one place. They want them all in their library. And if you're an audiobook listener, you're already paying like money, right? You're paying real money. And if we're in KU, you can, for $13 a month, you can just read the smorgasbord of all the books you want to read. Audiobook listeners are used to paying for their books and they're fine with that. So, Dakota has found a lot of his readers will buy direct because they wanted to get it 4 weeks early. And then they'll still buy it again when it comes out on Audible because they want to have all their books in their little library tucked into one nice little place. So his readers will go and buy it again and then go leave their review. And then sometimes even mention in their review that they read it 4 weeks ago because they just want to like stick their finger in the eye early. It's such a funny mentality, but it's true. I remember when the Harry Potter books were being published, and I remember book 4 was like the Goblet of Fire was when it had really started to take off. And I was watching the news, and back when people remember when the news like. You would just turn on and watch it. It was on the television, and they were showing like the lines around the corner at midnight at Barnes and Noble of people waiting to buy that book. And they would buy it, and then they would run home and they'd stay up all night reading the whole book just so they could be the first one on the internet the next morning to say, I read it. I was the first one. Right. There's a lot of that mentality. And the more people are super fans of your work, the bigger that mentality gets. Right. Reddit, of course, is where all the lit RPG people hang out. But if you go into lit RPG, Reddit subthread, you will find a lot of people in there talking about, oh yeah, I already read that book. I got it direct. I bought it direct and I've already read it. Already listened to it. It was amazing. And people were like, what? I didn't know it was out. I haven't seen it yet. Oh, you can only buy it from his website. I got it from his Patreon. Like, there's a lot of that mentality, but isn't that what we want from our readers, right?
That's exactly what you want. Well, we're 15 minutes into overtime. And, Greta
I was going to ask about taxes, but
taxes you handle through Shopify, WooCommerce.
I was going to say, do they handle that? Like if you have international VAT,
BookFunnel is just the distribution.
We don't do the taxes.
A button is pushed over here, and the book goes out over here, and boom, the reader's made happy, and you got money in your pocket.
And does Shopify send you something at the end of the year that you use for your taxes, or do you have to?
Shopify has a really simple system where they let you pick how you want to handle the taxes. And basically it's like, I don't want Shopify to do anything. I'll do everything myself. And they're like, okay, cool. It's on you. We don't have any responsibility here. You can tell Shopify that I want you to calculate the taxes and I will pay them. And I don't want you to charge anybody. Just calculate and tell me when I'm supposed to pay taxes. So those, like some authors are willing, like with that, they're willing to say, yeah, listen, I live in Texas. I have to charge 8.25% to anybody that lives in Texas. I'll just eat that. I'll pay that so that all of my audiobooks are just $10, $10, $10, $10. So Shopify will say, well, here's everybody from Texas who bought it, and now you need to remit these taxes to the state of Texas. And then finally, you can actually have Shopify collect the taxes for you, and then they'll give you the money and a spreadsheet that says, here's what you owe, here's who you need to pay. It's not actually that complicated. I know it scares a lot of people, especially in the US, because what's funny is like people got so scared about VAT because the European Union set up this whole value-added tax system, but their system is super easy. BookFunnel pays VAT tax, and they have it all set up where you can just pick a country. We picked Ireland because they speak English. You just pick one country, and you just mail that. You literally just upload a CSV that says, here's how much I got to pay to Belgium. Here's how much I owe to, the UK, which they're not in the European Union anymore. Here's what I owe to Italy. Here's what and here's my credit card. And you make the payment. In the US, we don't have that. We have 50 little fiefdoms that everybody has to pay kind of differently. But for the most part, until you're doing real sales, like if you're not selling, I think state of California is like, if you're not selling $250,000 in California, then you don't have to worry. You don't have to pay attention to the taxes. So it's really only when you get up to I say this not as an accountant, please don't take that as legal advice. I say go Google it. But what we have found is there are plugins for WooCommerce, and Shopify has really easy instructions on how to set that stuff up.
There you go.
Well, Wayne, did we get any YouTube questions before we?
We had a few comments, but no real questions. No, Bill Black's watching. Hey, Bill. Anyway, no real questions. I guess it's time for me to go eat is what it is.
Well, that's as good a reason as any to close up.
Damon, thanks for being on the show with us. It's always fun talking to you. I look forward to your presentations every year at NINC. And Nick, thanks for being on with us. And thanks to our sponsors and supporters, Down Island Press, Aurora Publicity, How Not to Sell, Pirate Radio, and Tropical Authors. And okay, I think I got them. Did I get them?
I think that was it.
I got them that time. I keep saying I'm going to put a sticky note right here, but I keep forgetting.
Well, thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And everybody watching, thanks for watching. And don't forget to subscribe. Click the notification bell so that you get notifications next time. And we'll see you next month.